Hey guys, it's Baban and I'm back with another time lapse and I'm painting a Mista. I did paint a Dio, I'll put a link to that video as well, but I wanted to paint Mista as well because I had an idea for a pose, so I went with it. Also, this painting and the process video and everything was released early on the Patreon, so thank you for subscribing. This is the time-lapse of the full thing from Clip Studio, and I had a bit of a time getting the pose to work. I had to take a lot of reference pictures of myself, which was kind of the point of it. I was trying to study, but that's kind of difficult when you're trying to shift it to like male anatomy when you ain't built like that. And trying to correct the things that are different and make it as extreme of a pose as I could, I guess. And I can spot a lot of things that went wrong with it. I'm gonna try and not whinge about them too much on here because I've been told that I do that too much, but I will talk about this as I'm going. My goal for this was to try and do something similar to the Dio, try and do something directly from reference with a pose like that, and, you know, take photo reference of myself to get a very specific pose that I wanted. I wanted to do more rendering, and I wanted to do this in a different way to Dio, in that with him, I did it grayscale and then put the colours on. I wanted to do this going straight into the colours, so that I would be forced to simultaneously think about the value and the colour and how those are working together and see if that is something that I could process. I think I fell short on some bits on that, you know what, I will roast myself in this video, I can't help it. But we're starting off with the sketch anyway, and I was also trying, especially with this arm at the front, I wanted to get really into the anatomy on it and make sure that the curves and everything looked right. I think I fell short with actually putting the clothing on the top because it covers up a lot of that, but I think the base that I had underneath I liked. And also with the rest of the build for the body, I may have fallen short on the legs a little bit also, because like I say, trying to translate it into a male hip structure was a little bit different or difficult comparing two photo references of myself. Since a lot of the body on this is going to get obscured by the arm and the foreshortening on it, also, I wanted to make sure that I drew everything in separate layers so that I had that construction underneath before I added the arm and everything on top, so that I would still get everything in the correct place. I wanted to focus on the tummy squishing and the curve that that would make also, even if that was something that the clothes cover, because I guess I made his top a bit more baggy. I didn't want to make it completely skin tight because it looks like a jumper, so I wanted to add more of the fabric curves and rolls and creases into it, but you can see I still went in and drew all the muscles just to annoy myself and see if I could. I just wanted to see if I could, you know? That's all. It's good construction practice. I should be able to, you know, boom, 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 kick it out real quick, and then put the clothes on top and not have a problem. I found it really helpful with Dio that I did all that structure underneath as well, even though I drew the fabric on him a little bit thinner so that it would sit on the form smoother, I suppose, and give more definition, but it's not going to sit the same on Mista as it does on Dio, but I still wanted that construction because I've been trying to work specifically on that, and you can see that in a lot of the process pieces that I've been posting on the Patreon of other things that I've been drawing and painting, and all the work that is underneath anything like this that I do. Now, what specifically bothered me by the end, and I don't know why I didn't change it at this point, but the way that the sleeve sits on his wrist is a bit too square and angular, and it doesn't give enough of a curve to the form that is underneath. It doesn't sit correctly, and that's one of the main things in this that bothers me. If you guys can see it, let me know. I would like to know what it is in this otherwise even that you can see that I need to work on. I would very much like people to point out what they think looks strange or needs more work on my end to improve. Anyway, I was trying to get a very defined sort of twist where we have the angle of the head and the face sort of curving around, and a nice curve on the neck that is pointing one way, and then that juxtaposes the curve of the arm that we have. And you know what? I was maybe like doing silly poses for fun to think of ideas of what would be cool and what angles would be cool to draw. Especially in recent stuff, I've been trying to do a lot more foreshortening with the hands very much in the foreground, because I think that makes for fun poses. And this was me dipping my toe into that. But I feel like moving around like that helps me to visualize what kind of weird poses I want to do. It helps me get more of an understanding also of where things stand in space. So if I'm making a pose that I'm trying to draw, I can think about, where is my foot in this image? So if I just had a reference image that I'd found online of a pose similar to this, which I tried, but I could not find what I wanted, so I had to take one myself. But in that situation, I wouldn't be able to see where exactly the legs were going, so I would lose some context from that and have to extrapolate that with the perspective that I set out. But being able to do the pose myself and take my own reference images, I have a understanding in my own body of where my limbs go and the movement and how everything corresponds to everything else. And I also advocate a lot of the time for what animators do, which is to have a mirror near them so that they can reference their own facial expressions when they're drawing. And that helps a whole lot. So why not do it with the rest of the pose? Don't worry about looking silly, just shut the curtains or whatever. It's for reference. No one has to see. No one has to see the pictures. It's just for reference. Anyway, what am I doing? I did some silly little doodles of his face because he needed some pouty lips, because I thought that would be funny. It suits him. I feel like he would have a wide, blocky head too, like a, maybe not like a pit bull, but you know, he got one of those like puggy faces, I reckon. He has the stereotypical wide head, you know, and buff, sort of dumb but strong idiot build is what I was thinking. That's kind of what suits him, but obviously he's like a bit more lithe. But that is the general build that I was trying to go for with him. And the kind of strong jaw too. I'm not quite sure that I got his face as I wanted it, and like I say, I kind of made everything a bit too bendy to where it's kind of broken in a way that I don't think it looks as good as it could have been, but I was trying really hard to push what I was doing, so maybe what I'm learning from it is worth more than the, oh no, it's broken. Going and adding all his stands in also, I, through watching it, was thinking, okay, so they eat food, he feeds them food, and they eat. Okay, so there's a bunch of them. Now, you could very easily set them on someone, like piranhas, because that would be terrifying. But I guess he's too much of a good boy to set them on someone like that and for them to consume human flesh. But I think that would be very funny. So my idea was that number 5 down here has got a taste for human flesh. It ain't no pepperoni. He's going a bit mental. That was my idea. But, you know, it's pepperoni if you want it to be. It's human flesh if you want it to be. I don't know if you like my headcanon there, but I was quite convinced that that was the way that was going to go, and that them eating things was some kind of foreshadowing for that. As in they would devour you if set on you. And yeah, I was disappointed, but hey ho, I can draw silly things myself. It's fine. Getting all of those stripes to work on him as well was a whole thing. I guess I've done enough wireframing of forms though that I'm a bit more used to it. I had a lot of fun with the smoky details as well. I always tend to lean into those when I can. I've been looking at a lot of Muka art recently too, and I want to start studying the flow of those. I definitely have a way that I draw flowy things on my own. That is very specific to the way that I draw things, but I want to study the motion that Muka has in his art and see if that's something that I am drawing from, I guess it is because I like Muka anyway, and that's why I do that kind of thing. But I want to see quite how close that lines up, because I think mine is distinct from that, but also similar in a way in that I'm trying to achieve the same motion with it. I also tend to use it as a compositional tool. So I have a very big S shape that I've drawn in to block all of it out and give us a nice swoosh around him so that it centers everything and doesn't have you, you know, looking in different directions away from the main focus, and draws you up from the bottom. It also helps with the pose. I think I mentioned that already, where you kind of look at the bottom first and then the flow of his arm goes upwards to where his face is. But having that smoke swirl around the top of him also helps to center it, which is definitely a thing that Muka does a lot because he uses a lot of those circular frames to keep your eye in the middle, but it's also a decorative thing as well. Anyways, I'm getting onto the line art, and I think I had trouble with the crotch on the pants. I need to draw more pants, because I seem to be having issues with hips and pants and the way that they wrap around and the form, because it's like they're kind of square but they're kind of round and there's muscles involved, and man, I need to get into the muscle attachments and things of the hips and the pelvis. I have been eyeing up a full-scale skeleton, so whenever I manage to get one of those, I will make videos with it, because that would be a brilliant thing to use in tutorials, but I just want one for reference to use. I've been after one for a long time, but I'm trying to commit now. I'm trying to really commit to getting one so that I have it for reference, because it will help a whole lot. I want to draw more skeletons because they are fun, and then I can look at it and I can reference my anatomy book and see the muscle attachments, and it's going to be great because I will be able to see all the divots and things and where the muscles attach then. I tried to give it a bit of weight with the patterning that's on him, because when I was looking at Araki's illustrations of him, there is a bit of weight there, so I'm trying to just do a bit of line weight in where you would see the occlusion shadows, I guess, because you have the crevice of where those details join to the plane of the rest of the jumper, I guess, so that it's slightly raised. So you can see the liner weight on these is heavier as it goes to this bottom side of it, and it's a lot softer at the top. I think with this line art I should have maybe kept it softer too, and had some parts where it wasn't joining up all the way. That's a style that I want to lean into more. It just always aggravates me because you have to do so much fixing of where the fill will leak when you try and put the colours in, so it's always like, it expedites it more if you just complete the lines, so that's what I usually lean into because I really hate having to deal with like manually filling things in and making sure that I'm closing all the gaps, and it's just, oh, it's a nightmare and I hate it, but it looks so cool stylistically. I really need to try that because I know I can do it. I know I can do it. I think I've done it before a while ago. I just tend to lean into this because, like I say, it's quicker. But it does not look as cool, and it makes it more difficult when you paint things because you don't get the same contrast on the edges where it fades out into the lighter color. If you have that dark line immediately next to that, separating the highlight from whatever color you have in the background or whatever value you have in the background. So it's a bit of an interference and breaks up potentially where you would have glow kind of boosting out from something where the light's hitting it and it's got a little bit of an aura around it. I found a very interesting chart on the differences with line art and the way that it's done, and one of the differences was where you have the closed lines and where you have more open lines. So I've been trying to stare at that until I understand it so that I can actively lean into things that annoy me so that I can learn more. Because that's what I struggle with, because it's like, oh, it's not in the comfort zone, don't want to do it, it's going to be annoying and take longer, but that's part of the learning curve. It's going to take longer until you figure it out and learn to do it faster. Figure out the shortcuts. I am almost done with the line art here also, and then I will start doing the colors. And with this, I did a lot of variations to find out what lighting direction I wanted to do, because it was quite difficult with the pose, because I was trying to focus this on the pose specifically, and then the lighting was something that came second, so I wasn't thinking about those in tandem as I was organizing it in my head before I drew it. So I don't think they came together as well as they could have. With the Dio, the lighting was a bit more front-facing, I think, or it was very contained to light up specific areas. But with Mista, it was more difficult because there was so much overlapping with his arm over the rest of his body because of that foreshortening. But I really wanted to do something with that, so I needed to make sure that the shadows weren't going to distract from that and were going to help that, because like I mentioned, you look at the hand because that's like the largest kind of more contrasty thing, and then you kind of follow up in that curve into a swirl at the top where his face is, just with the natural flow of the way that the pose is laid out, which is very purposeful. So I need something where the contrast is going to exaggerate that so that it still reads the same way, and your eye still follows the same path, basically. Just getting the flats down. I think I need to work more on brows too. There's something about the eyebrows and the way that they sit around the orbits that I'm not getting like quite right. I do have a habit of making the eyes sit on more of a flat plane than they should, and the way that they curve around the side of the face, or at least the eyelids curve around the side of the face, doesn't sit quite right all the time when I do it. So that's something I've been trying to work on with doing those face studies that I have posted sheets of, and it gets more difficult when I start introducing different expressions as well. So that's why I did a lot of studying on that. But I think it's something I still need to go to. But I didn't want to make it quite as strong on him anyway, because he's got like a very wide set face, just in general. And like I said, the exaggerated cheekbones and jawbones that I wanted to push and give him a bit of a puggy face. Anyway, here I go with my lighting test. So I wanted it to cast some of a shadow, I guess, onto his body so that we would have the contrast of that shadow there against where his arm was. So you can see I'm doing iterations of this to figure out what is going to sit best. I wanted to make sure his face was lit up and that we had shadow cast underneath his chin as well so that his face would stand out, and then we have some shadow cast like down onto the pants and everything. So it's lit from quite high up so that I suppose the shadows aren't too strong. I wanted it more softly lit, but to still have some cast shadows, and I don't think I really pushed the shadows enough. You can see that, I guess the angle of the lighting is coming straight down, like in that angle that I'm drawing right now with the ruler. So the way that it's casting is very much, it just looks like, you know, a direct kind of drop shadow onto the rest of his body, and that makes it look quite a lot more flat. So I think I could have done better on that. What I do is soften out a lot of the shadows later on to make that less obvious, but I don't think I like the way that that looks. I decided to make it softer to kind of counter that, but I think I could have done better. It was a whole fight trying to get that to look how I wanted it to, and I don't think I like the way that it ended up with the shadows. That was something I really should have put more focus on earlier on in the process as I was working on the pose, and maybe done some rough shadow blocking on it to establish where that shadow would need to be to make the composition read the best. I do like the shadow under his chin though. I think that helps a lot, and I will bring bounce light into it a bit later from his chest and everything where there's more light hitting. And you can see I've got some cast shadows from them as well onto the pants and everything. But yeah, this one definitely annoyed me. I had a lot more trouble as well because I was trying to, instead of doing it fully in grayscale and then colorizing it, because I didn't like the way that the colors ended up on the TO. I think they look a bit too washed out and it looked better in grayscale, and the values sort of changed after I added the colors on to not looking quite right in my opinion. I wanted to see if I could do that same process but incorporate the colors at the same time on this one, so I'm trying to process the colors, the values, the shadows, the kind of light and direction cast shadows, and I think that might have been too much for me to process at the same time. I was very purposely trying to overload how many things that I would be processing at the same time like that to see if I could handle it. But that also made it a lot more difficult, and if I just took that one thing away and dealt with the light and direction, the cast shadows, if I did that earlier on, I think that would have lightened the processing load, and I would have done better with the colors and the values on their own. That said, I do like the way that the Sex Pistols turned out with the gold. I think that looks quite nice. I quite enjoy shading gold and doing the very heavy highlights? Heavy highlights, like specular highlights, I guess, and reflections of different colors. I think that is very fun. I still think they could have turned out better though. I do need to study gold as well. Also, the way I'm going about shading him is doing my usual single color cell shading layer and then bringing in my darker like occlusion shadows and things that I'm adding in here on a different layer to give it more volume. Especially in those darker corners, I went and added quite a lot of that in. So you can see anywhere that I have that cell shading, I'm going and adding that into that block. And then I'll add my highlights and core shadows and things as well. And just making sure all these details are shaded in. That was such a pain. Such a pain. I don't know how Araki deals with repeatedly drawing so many patterns on characters. That would drive me nuts. It would drive me nuts. I really enjoy doing it on illustrations because it's a very easy way to make something look impressive if it's something you can do quite easily. Like I say, if you're used to doing the wireframe, but doing that repeatedly in comic frames, man, that would do my head in. I did do a lot of versions, I suppose, of his face. So I went in later and repainted his face a few times and adjusted it because I wanted to show more form in it with the lighter values, because I didn't want to wash his face out completely and destroy the form there. And it was quite difficult because I pulled the shadows in more than I had intended to initially from when I did that cell shading pass, just to block them down the kind of general direction. And it was quite difficult. And I still don't think I like him. I'm gonna keep saying that in the video. I still don't think I like the way that he turned out. But you know what? It's learning, so it's fine. It's learning, so it's fine. And I want to be honest when I decide that I don't like something. As long as I can like talk about it and explain why, technically, I don't like it in technical terms. But yeah, I see the problems and I will learn from them and do better the next time. I think I was adding a little bit of softer light here so that we can organize the values better. So like I say, I wanted to have this stronger value where his arm is at the front, so that that is the main focus, and then we pull upwards from that and we can follow the curve of his arm and also the curve of the, I was going to say Mist because his name's Mista, but it's not Mist, the smoke. The curve of the smoke that goes up and around too. I do keep turning that off as well because it's just obscuring what I'm doing at the moment, but it is staying there and messing with values again. I do have a layer over the top that changes everything to grayscale that I keep checking and then turning on and off. And what I'll be doing later is leaving some of that on to take away some of the saturation. Sometimes I make it too harsh. where it doesn't need to be. And that also helps to soften everything out into the background if we don't have as much contrast, because I wanted that to be very focused on the curve of this arm up through to where his head is. And I also really like this blue that I put in the background. I thought that was nice. The blue and the yellow, and I can't remember if I flip it by the end. I'm sure there's something that I do. There's something that I do with it. I really like watching through these and not paying too much attention to the finished thing and seeing how I solve the problems in this as they arise also. So apologies if I say, oh, I don't know where this is going next, because that's kind of the point. It helps me analyze what I'm doing. That's why I think it's very helpful to go and watch back what you've done, record it and watch back, compile it like this into a long video, or do time lapses, because I get the same thing when I watch those, and it really helps me learn and see what I did and maybe where I stumbled and could have done better. Also, I'm adding more brightness onto him. I think I've got a bit of color variation going on. Now, as I was adding that lighter yellow onto him, it does dull down some of the colors, like the blue. So I go back in with overpaints and things later and add some more saturation into that, because I don't want to kill that blue off too much. That needs to be saturated where it is. You can kind of see how it's coming together now. I also added earlier on a bit of variation into the skin tone, so you can see that where that is, especially on his hand, around the knuckles. And I also have the beginnings of some subsurface scattering that's going on around the edge of that shading that I'm gonna noodle out more later on. I think this is me fighting with his face and seeing quite how heavy I wanted to make the shadows. I was trying really hard to keep these values like subtle. I'm not entirely sure that I won. Sometimes I block out the sections a bit too much. Like if you've been watching my stuff on the Patreon, the way I have been redesigning my formula for faces, sometimes I lean into that too much and block out the shapes, and you can really tell where I'm using it, especially when I start rendering things out like this. And it can look kind of too blocky, so around the edges and where things fade out, I usually make them too harsh, because I am very used to working from cell shading to softer values, because that's a quicker process for me and it works well for commissions. So I'm very used to that, and going from the harder shadows to the softer ones. So that tends to leak in a little bit too much. Like you can see I really pushed it too much around the mouth there, and it looks real weird. There is much too much of a highlight where that dimple is, where there shouldn't be. But I do go over the face later. But that's very annoying to look at the moment, like in the process. Ew. It's kind of nice watching stuff back though, and noticing what I did wrong and being like, oh, that's a bad idea, you should fix that, and then not long after I go back and fix it. So that gives me a bit of hope and a bit more confidence in myself also. It's just record what you do and watch it back. It's real helpful. Here I go with the highlights too, and then they start to look like way too strong and need calming down. I really like blocking them out in big chunks like this though. I have been doing that on some recent streams as well, where I've been blocking out the highlights like that to try and also exaggerate the shapes that I was mentioning before and the way that I was drawing the smoke, and the stylization that I have there, and making it stronger with the highlights, because why not? I tend to soften them out quite a lot, and I think I soften these out soon, because I like to get them in place first and then soften them out. But you know, what if I make them stronger? What if I make them stronger? What if I make them worse? What if I lean into it? I feel like I should see what happens when I do that. And find out, because it may be interesting stylistically. I'm not sure. Okay, so he's starting to come together a bit now. I'm still messing with the values as I go, and here I am just putting my saturation back in. So I've got a layer of all of it with that reduction into grayscale on the top, and then that is slightly reduced, and I'm just washing in where I want most of that saturation to be. So you can see around his pants that are behind where that hand is at the front. Everything there is softened out quite a lot. Some of the stuff on the one side of his chest, also to make sure that that's washed out and we have a nice contrast with that arm against the rest of his body that's behind it, so that it stands out and comes forward into the frame more. Oh, now I'm going and fixing the smoke. I really, really like drawing smoke. It's a whole lot of fun. It leans very much into, as I said, my preference for going and doing very sharp edges and lines first and then softening them out. So it's really nice to draw the shapes in and then go and put gradients into that. So much fun. Now you can see where I've done a lot of that overpainting on his sleeve specifically too. I got really into the way that the fabric was folding and moving, and adding the shadows and the saturation into that just to bump it up more, because it was fading out way too much with that yellow on it. And just keep on going, doing more of it, getting the kissy lips in, making sure that they read okay. More messing with values, kind of core shadows need to be exaggerated because they got lost in quite a lot of this, I think, as well. More painting and looking at values. I had a whole fight redrawing his face. I'm not sure if this is getting to that point. It might be a bit later on, because I know that I kind of redid it a couple of times quite heavily towards the end, where I started to struggle. Watching this back also, I'm starting to realize that this is getting to the point where I have that layer where I wash everything out, and that sits on top of the painting that is underneath. So as I'm going and doing more painting, I am removing that and then painting underneath. And part of me is like, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to start layering the paintings down. And start forcing yourself to deal with the painting on one layer and then merging it down as you go, because I can go over the top of everything and repaint it anyway if I need to. You know, that's the intelligent thing to do at this stage, because at a certain point it just gets to where it takes longer for you to jump between the layers. And occasionally I do that, but it's mostly for smaller study pieces or things that don't need to be as tidy. Because I think I hate the idea of having to colour pick more. Not necessarily by eyedropping, but actually going to the colour wheel and picking things is kind of a pain in the butt. I mostly try to get a lot of the colours down as I want them to be, so that I can directly colour pick from them and not have to go to the colour wheel as much, because that again kind of extends the time that you need to spend on things. So I try and make the process as fast as I can. But maybe it is time. Maybe it is time to rip the plaster off and just start painting one layer paintings. I think it's mostly with things like this, where on his pants especially, like if I want to put a highlight on that and maintain where all of those stripes are, it's going to be real difficult to maintain the sharp edges of them and get the highlights on those and the different color. Whereas I can slap another layer on there and, you know, make it a highlight layer, turn it to glow or something, and then it will sit over the top of everything quite nicely, and I can paint it in and I can adjust it until I get it to the right color. But yeah, I don't know. So sometimes I want to change things, and it's nice to have the insurance there of I already have this on a separate layer, so I can just tweak it and maybe lock it and gradient into it if it needs to be different colors in different places. So man, it's a fight. I feel like it makes things take longer, and I need to be able to make stuff fast. It's just how it is. I need to be able to make things as fast as I can. But I guess if I get better at it, then I will go quicker, and I won't have to do as much. It's like two different directions, man. You know, I need to be able to kick things out, production line. But I also need to run and learn things. Oh, you can see I'm doing some of that highlight actually, or I guess kind of bounce light on the leg of his trousers where all those little crunches are. I've been really liking the crunches in fabric like that lately, especially on jeans and things. So I'm trying to bring that in from the background to give us the variation in the shadows there with that bounce light. And I'm starting to paint in the metallics. I don't quite like how his gun turned out. I feel like I could have done the metallics on that better. I guess I didn't want it too shiny, but I wanted to kick out that purple quite a lot. And painting in the gold. I quite like leaving the gold really chunky, actually, when I paint it. But I was just trying to balance out where I have the saturation in that as well, because we want to keep it mostly in that darker color, and then bring in some of the bounce onto it, because they're gonna catch the light way stronger. So I really upped the way that I was adding that into the sides of the shadows there, and sort of defining the numbers on them was quite fun too. Just to play that up a bit more, really show the, I guess where it looks etched in, it's like recessed slightly. Yeah, painting them was fun. It was kind of difficult to catch it at first. I'm trying to bring in the colours that it would be reflecting from his pants as well, from the environment around him, because anything shiny is going to pick up a whole lot more of that. And the bounce light from it, or I guess reflections, you would call it. I'm not sure. Bounce? I guess it's bounce light that they're picking up more, but it's also reflections because they're shiny. Both. I guess both. Secondary lighting as well around the edges, kind of atmospheric bounce. I'm never sure if I use these technical terms correctly. I just mash all the ones I know together and hope that they describe things. But I generally consider, like, what I have in the sky at the back is the general atmosphere that I have going. So you can see that wash that I have on his leg there is leaning into those colors. So it's like he's fading into the background. I guess it's like atmospheric perspective, but then you have that general atmosphere color bouncing onto the edges of them, where it's picking up on them as well, the sky color. Doing a little bit more painting on his face too. Oh, see, he's got the kind of atmospheric like bounce light as well from the sky, because he's got a lot of that blue in those shadows too. So I guess you could argue it's like secondary lighting, because it's going to have some light coming from it, but it's also kind of bounce light. It's fun when you get a lot of sky color bouncing into the shadows on things and they start turning bluish. Very nice. Here I go with his face again, and flipping the canvas wildly because it was aggravating me so badly. I really don't think I did a good job on his face. I went way over the top with making him very lumpy, I guess. I just don't think I did good. I don't think I did good. You can see as well I'm sort of turning layers of paint on and off because I have a few going on. Because I'll usually, once I start getting into the overpaint like this, what I'll do is do one layer and then I will make another one and keep painting, and that allows me to compare what I have done already to what I'm adding on, so it's a lot easier to hit undo rather than doing it on one layer. It makes it a lot easier to do. I don't have to struggle as much. It's almost like looking back at these time lapses, because I can skip back to the earlier point and see if that looked better, and if it did, I can delete the newest overpaint layer and go and redo things, you know? I don't think I gave him enough bulk on his cheeks. I don't think I made his cheeks full enough. They look kind of flat for this angle. But you can see I've smoothed a lot of his face out so that it reads better. I probably could have done with more shadow from the nose as well, like off to the side. That could have been shaded in more. I was simultaneously a little bit cowardly with the harsh edges, but also way too into like the soft values, I guess. I just didn't balance them out very well, I don't think. Looking at him now, oh, he doesn't look as bad now. It might also be a thing of me leaving the eyeballs for last. Is a bad habit that I have. So faces tend to look strange until I put the eyeballs in, but I also feel like that helps a lot, because once you see someone with the eyeballs, then it really starts to register as a face, because that's what you instinctively recognize, but if I don't add the eyeballs in, then I can just look at the rest of the form of the face very technically. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but I think that is what I'm doing when I do that, because that is always what I do. It's also a thing of I don't want to get into the details very heavily. And I would consider the eyes like the last little detail that you put on. So I don't want to get into those too early in the process, because then my brain will just trigger and be like, oh, we're done then. Okay, I'm bored now. Once I think I'm done with something like that, and I've done the fun last details, my brain thinks I'm done, and then anything after that is just a slog again. So I guess I've Pavloved myself with that one, but you generally don't want to do any of those little highlighty details until last anyway, so maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. It's just a bad idea, and I've also Pavloved myself. Oh yeah, look, I did a whole lot more softening and edging around the arm to make that stand out. I think that looks kind of cool, actually, especially the way that it fades out on his other shoulder that is further back. I like that little gradient in there. I do have a habit of defining things like around the edges like that. This is also something, like I was mentioning, where it may have benefited from me having those lines be skinnier or to break more, so that you would get that blue edge defining it and not have the in-between of that very dark line art sort of jumping in the middle of where I have the rest of the colours on the hand, and then that. But I didn't want to start painting over the line art, because also my other goal is to leave the line art alone and do painting underneath it, and be able to paint and have the line art still on, because for a long time, I think I made my line art too chunky, so the value of it, once I started trying to paint inside of it, the dark value of the line art would interfere with the way I was trying to set up the rest of the values, especially around the edges, which is why I'm trying to make my lines very, very thin, like on this. But I think I'm getting better at that, because the thin line art helps a whole lot. A whole lot. The next step, as I say, is to just start to wash it out and not join the lines entirely, and be okay with that, and just deal with the extra time it would take to filter. Here's me going and doing more poking at his face and flipping the canvas like mad again. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I just kept overpainting his face to make sure that it was right. But yeah, there we go, he's done. Here is the time-lapse process, again, all condensed into one thing. This was another case of the file is gigantic because I have the time-lapse on. But yeah, I guess I'm not as mad about the way that he turned out as I've been professing for the rest of this video. He didn't turn out as bad as I thought. I think I managed to negate a lot of the problems that I presented myself with the way that I directed those shadows in doing that washed out atmospheric perspective and bringing those brighter kind of bounce light edges around everything from that. So it worked out better than it could have been, and I definitely worked with what I presented myself. Anyway, yeah, here we go. He is done. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped. If it did, give us a like, share if you think it will help someone else, and subscribe for new videos when I have them. This one was posted early on the Patreon, and there will be more early on the next month, along with another tutorial, because you get monthly exclusive tutorials on the Patreon. Yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye!